Hi, my name is Jeremy Shue and I'm one of the pastors at Silverwood Mennonite Church in Goshen, Indiana. And we are a very satisfied customer of Church Growth Services. Back in 2016, our church building needed an HVAC system update. And long story short, that HVAC project grew into a $700,000 church foyer renovation project. And we decided to hire Church Growth Services to help us with the initial feasibility study for this project. There were several people in our church that remembered we had worked with Church Growth Services several decades ago on another building project. They thought it had gone really well, and so we wanted to use their services again. So we did that. Upon completion of the feasibility study, we decided to move ahead with the project, and we also decided at that time to hire Church Growth Services to help us with the next phase of the fundraising at the additional cost for the project. Now, I will admit, as the pastor, I had a lot of questions about this. I wasn't certain that spending $700,000 was what we should be doing as a church. I wasn't certain that the money was going to be there. And then when I saw the detailed plan that Church Growth Services gave on what was going to happen on each Sunday over the next couple of months, I felt a little bit overwhelmed. It looked like a lot of work, a lot of details to pay attention to, and I wasn't quite certain how it was actually going to go. But I will tell you that because of Church Growth Services' attention to detail, our plan was wildly successful in several ways. First, all of that detail that they spelled out got massive amounts of our congregation involved. There were teams of people for all different phases of the project. And while this did take a little bit of work up front, the payback was tremendous. We had all kinds of ownership in the project. We had all kinds of volunteer hours poured in by people who wouldn't normally be helping out in various ways at the church. And because of all of that involvement, people were invested in the project even before they committed to giving any type of monetary contribution. So that aspect was huge. And then secondly, we financially brought in more than we were even asking for because we followed the method that Church Growth Services recommended for us. I'll admit, when I first saw their method, I thought, man, this is the opposite of how I would do it at every single turn. Well, thank goodness they're the experts and I'm not, because when we followed their method, we brought in more money than we were planning on the initial contribution phase. So much so that we actually were able to pay for their services that we hadn't planned on. So that was a fantastic success story. You know, the other thing that Church Growth Services helped us with was they didn't shy away from planning for some long-term debt, as well as, taking pledges over time for the project. What this did was it gave our church an opportunity to continue utilizing those volunteers because every quarter we were giving updates on how pledges were coming in and how people were participating. As we had new people joining church because of those updates and because we were only receiving pledges and had a little bit of long-term debt, people were able to contribute to the project even though they hadn't been a part of the church for the initial ask. And so that ongoing participation was huge. The other piece of it was that it let us tell the story of the foyer and the difference that it was making in our church frequently. It wasn't just, this is the money that we raised. It was, look at the difference that this building project has actually done for our church. And it did make a huge difference in the feel of our congregation and how people even interacted. I'm convinced of it. So one of the questions I've been asked is, would you recommend Church Growth Services to another church? And the answer is a resounding yes, and I already have. So if your church is wondering if your next capital campaign is feasible or how in the world you'd go about raising the kind of money you're looking at, I would highly recommend Church Growth Services. And I bet that just like us, they will help you be more successful than you would even anticipate. Thanks.